Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about solving radical equations. So, radical equations contain radicals with variables in the radicand are called radical equations. These are solved by first using the following steps. 1. Isolate the radical on one side of the equation. 2. Square each side to eliminate the radical. So, when we look at our first problem here, it's 16 equals radical x over 2. So we want to get the radical x by itself. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2. Gives me 32 equals radical x. Now the opposite of taking the square root is squaring. So I'm going to square both sides. And the square root of x squared is just x. And then I use my calculator to do 32 squared. And it's 1,024. Number 2. Again, I want to isolate the radical. So what's under the radical, what's in the radical, is I want to get the square root of 4x minus 7 alone. So in order to get that alone, I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And that gives me the square root of 4x minus 7 equals 5. I now want to undo the square root because I have the square root by itself. So I square both sides. And 5 squared is 25. And then the square root of 4x minus 7, whole thing squared, is 4x minus 7. And now I just finished solving that by adding 7 to both sides. So I get 4x equals 32. Divide both sides by 4. And x equals 8. Now I should check these. So to check, I start off with the original equation. And then I substitute. So it's 4 times 8 minus 7 plus 2 equals 7. So 4 times 8 is 32 plus 5 is 25 plus 2. 7 square root of 25 is 5 plus 2 equals 7. And it checks. So I want you to pause and I want you to try 1 and 2 and come back and check. So number 1, first I subtract 6 from both sides. So I get square root of a equals 26. Then the opposite of square root is I square both sides. So I get a equals 676. Number 2, I need to isolate the square root of x first. So in order to get rid of the 2 in front of the square root of x, I divide both sides by 2. So I have the square root of x equals 4. I then need to eliminate taking the square root, so I square both sides, and x equals 16. So again, I want you to pause, and I want you to try 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then come back. So again, what I do first is I square both sides, because I already have the radical isolated, because it was by itself. So I get 49 equals 26 minus n. I then subtract 26. So that's 23 equals negative n. Divide both sides by negative 1. And n equals negative 23. Number 4, I need to get rid of the square root. So I square both sides since it's already isolated. So I have x minus 4 equals 36. I add 4 to both sides. And x equals 40. Number 5, the square root's already isolated. So I take this square of both sides. And I have 2m plus 3 equals 25. I subtract 3. 2m equals 22. Divide by 2. M equals 11. Number 6, I need to isolate the radical. So I subtract 19 from both sides. I get square root of 3b minus 2 equals 5. I now square both sides to eliminate the radical. I get 3b minus 2 equals 25. I then solve by adding 2. 3b equals 27. Divide both sides by 3. And b equals 9. So I want you to do the next two, come back and check. Okay, so number 7, I started it out by squaring both sides. I added 1. I got 4x equals 10 divided by 4, x equals 2.5. Number 8 is trickier because I can't completely isolate the radical because I have that too. So what I want to do is I want to start out by squaring both sides. And so the square root of 3r plus 2 squared is 3r plus 2. 2 radical 3 squared just means 2 radical 3 times 2 radical 3, which is 4 radical 9, which equals 12. So while it looked trickier, that's really just a number there. So then I subtract 2. I get 3r equals 10, divide by 3, and r equals 10 thirds, or you could say 3 1/3. You should not say it's 3.3 repeating because then you forget the repeating. Number 9, while it's a fraction, it's still underneath the radical. So I'm going to square both sides, and that gives me x over 8 equals 16. I then multiply both sides by 8, and x equals 128. Number 10, I'm going to start by subtracting 3. So that's 2 radical 4x equals 8. And then divide by 2. So I have radical 4x equals 4. And now square both sides. And 4x equals 16. Divide by 4. X equals 4. So now we're going to talk about number 11. Use the two given functions to choose the best statement comparing the graphs of each other. So you can look at your calculator, or you can remember that when it's plus 6 outside the radical, that moves it up and down. And since it's plus, it goes up. So functions to graph is shifted up from graph 1. Number 12, here, this would be moved up from the parent. Sorry, I tried to pause. Excuse me. So here we're going to compare the two graphs. So again, I'm going to take a look at graphing them. Let's see if I can. Nope. So